Hi, Steve. Welcome to As a Manager podcast. If you don't know Steve, he's a broadcast journalist at CBC, and he's been working in broadcasting since 2013. My first question is actually, did you choose broadcasting or broadcasting chose you?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And you kind of preempted me a little bit because I was going to be really snarky and say, well, broadcasting chose me. But it's weird how you sometimes just find yourself kind of falling into these things without really realizing how it all happens. The reason being is because in 2013, which is, yeah, I guess you could say that's kind of like my start. That year, during the summer, it was actually my mother who told me, hey, why don't you go apply for this training program with the local Chinese radio station? So they run this sort of thing like once every year during the summer where they train up these people who don't know anything about broadcast with the hope that one or two of them can become presenters and hosts and contributors for the radio station. That was the program that I went through. So that was my start in radio.
That was actually your first job.
Not really a job.
Not really a job.
It was a program, a crash course,
training program.
Crash course training program. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what about your parents? So your mother was your main supporter.
Yeah, the instigator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about your dad?
My dad is interesting in the way that he didn't really have thoughts at first. He was kind of just like, as long as Steve is happy, as long as he's doing something that he enjoys, like it's all good. But he really started showing himself as like a fan and a supporter when I was at UBC. So this would have been about 2014, 2015, my last 2 years at UBC, where I was working for the campus radio station, and I was hosting a show there. I was hosting a music show that was devoted to showcasing Asian music. So I played Chinese music, some Japanese music, Korean music, and I was presenting a show as a host and producer, kind of like a little one-man operation. So that was a weekly program that I did for 2-3 years, kind of in the aftermath of the training program with the Chinese radio station. And my dad would listen. He was working overseas a lot at the time, but he would find ways to listen, and then he would record it, and then he would make like all his colleagues listen to it.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, he would go around telling everybody, hey, just so you know, like my son does this thing, and he would basically kind of like shove it in their faces a little bit, but. Hi, Dad. Thanks for subscribing to the podcast, I guess.
And the Vancouver's a Chinese language media company, Fairchild.
Fairchild, right?
Yeah. They offer Cantonese, Mandarin, TV and radio programming.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. You speak Mandarin.
Yeah, I speak Mandarin.
How did you learn it?
It was mostly by osmosis. Or I should say it was entirely by osmosis. It was basically just all through absorption. My parents did not put me in Chinese school or anything like that, and any amount of Mandarin that I learned, it was just speaking it at home.
They didn't want you to learn the language?
It's not that they didn't.
What you say?
No, it's not that they didn't want me to learn Mandarin. I think it's because my parents just had a really good idea of what kind of kid I was, and they knew that if I
what kind of kid you were?
The kind who would get bored eventually and just not want to do it anymore. So I think my parents suspected that, oh man, if we put Steve in Chinese school, is he going to want to like give it up in a year or 2 years? So I was just never put into Chinese school. And it was never anything that we had even discussed as a family. Like my parents never came to me and said, do you want to go? Or your dad and I think you should go. Why don't you give it a try? Those conversations just never came up. Any amount of Mandarin that I learned, it was just at home.
Just you?
Just me, just at home, yeah.
But they would speak Mandarin at home with you or between them? Like that was the first language yet?
Yeah, I would say Mandarin was still the first language at home. My parents would speak it to each other. There was a period when I would say maybe 6 to 9, 6 to 10, where my Mandarin had kind of atrophied a little bit. It just wasn't as good because I wasn't keeping up with it because I was speaking English more. Because you're going to school, you have friends who speak English, they don't necessarily share the same language. And I was speaking English a little bit more, even at home. And it was like a mix. I would speak some in Mandarin, I would speak some in English. then after a while, I started just making more of an effort to just speak in Mandarin at home. So I would pick up words and phrases from my parents. I would learn vocabulary from TV shows that they had on the TV while we were just doing other things. And all of these things you just gradually absorb, and kind of over time you build up a fluency in Mandarin. It's a different kind of fluency. It's the sort of fluency of someone who's never actually lived in the place where that language is spoken, but is proficient enough that you don't sound like a fool.
But
when you're
what
speaking
happened
it.
that made you start wanting to learn Mandarin? Because it wasn't for your parents; they were not forcing you to learn Mandarin. What happened?
I don't know if I can pinpoint it. I don't know if I can really pinpoint a reason. It was just one day I woke up and it was maybe even a subconscious decision to just speak Mandarin at home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think part of it was because like I don't have any siblings. Like it's just me and my parents here. So we've always been tight. Like we've always been close. And that's something that we still had in common, right? My parents are people who have actually lived in China, who have actually lived in the places where they were born and the places that they grew up. I just didn't have that. Right? Like I grew up here in Canada. So I wasn't as closely tied to the culture as maybe they were, but the one thing that I could absolutely grasp and something that I absolutely could share with them was still that language.
I'm gonna ask about your parents, but before that, when they saw you learning more Mandarin and trying to practice Mandarin, you probably were trying to learn from them at the same time. What was their reaction when they saw you? Like, hey, he's now interested in learning the language.
a little bit of that, definitely. It was just like, oh wow, like Steve just took this on himself. He started doing that, and they would also be surprised at times because I would use certain words that they just kind of thought or assumed I wouldn't know, and like I would say these words to them, and they would be like, wow. How do you know that word? Like, how do you know that's the right?
How did you learn that?
Yeah.
word?
How did you learn that? How did you know that was the context to use that word? How did you gauge this point in our conversation was the place to use that? And I was just like, I heard you and Dad use it when you were discussing. Like I heard you guys saying this, and I figured that's what it meant. Yeah.
Now you gotta be careful, right? When you have a conversation, now I understand everything that you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Now
they can't. Yeah. There's no slipping anything by me anymore.
They were probably proud of you, right?
Oh, I'm sure they were. Yeah.
And that made you feel like good when they said that, like we're happy because you want to learn Mandarin. Now that you're speaking the language, what was the comes to your mind when you remember that? Because I think that's it seems to be like a small achievement, but it's not, right? I mean, I'm a parent, right? So if I see my son and my daughter like wanting to speak Portuguese, in my case, I feel proud of them. Like I like when I see them like, keeping the language. Probably because we do have a policy at home, like it's Portuguese only at home. But it's nice to see them interested in like learning new words, new expressions, right? So I kind of relate to your parents. I know what probably was the feeling when they saw you the first time trying to practice and learn Mandarin.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think maybe there's a point of pride for my parents, but also even just a point of pride for yourself, right? I think a lot of Asian kids here, or even in the United States, you kind of grow up with this idea that your Asianness is not cool. Like you are told by your surroundings, or you're told by the people around you. I hesitate to say society as a whole, but your environment that kind of almost tells you these things, even subtly, that your Asianness is not something that is not trendy. It's not something that other people find interesting. They grow up with this idea that it's a hamper. It's a barrier to them fully assimilating into their surroundings, into their current living situations, their current society. But there's so much power, I think, in having that, right? Because there's a certain richness to your culture that you don't always fully get to appreciate unless you dip your toe into it. And like I've met people who have also spoken about how like, oh, well, look at these Asian kids who grew up here. They don't have anything that ties them to their parents' culture. They're bananas, right? like that. That's the word that they use.
That's the best word to
Yeah,
describe
and,
it.
yeah, and I think a lot of people growing up with this idea, some folks end up rejecting it. Some people just try to ignore it.
Yeah.
But for me, it was these little steps that kind of brought me a little bit closer to that. And we still have so much family where we come from in China. And like that's another thing that ties us to them. Like it's familial ties, it's cultural ties, it's these things that really make us who we are, right? So
Right, absolutely. About your parents, like, so they are first generation immigrant parents, right?
yes, yeah.
What do you know about their story, like moving to China to Canada?
Only the things that they've really shared with me, like the things that they have opened up to me about.
You mean like they didn't share everything? You don't think they?
I think they
Want to share everything?
It's not even. I don't think it's that they don't want to share. I think it's because they're far more confident and secure in their choices and what they have been through, and learning from their experiences, that they feel they don't need to justify it anymore, which I think is an extremely powerful thing. But I will tell you what I do know about my parents' history. My dad currently works as an engineer. My mom is in the pharmaceuticals industry. So both my parents come from STEM backgrounds. They're both scientists, essentially,
Right.
scientists and engineers. When we were in China, that's where I was born. It was during a time of a whole lot of upheaval. It was a whole lot of change happening in China, really fast and rapid change. When my parents were around my age, so let's just say late 20s, early 30s, the way things worked in China then was if you wanted the best chance at a stable life, you had to get an education, because the best jobs were either with the government in some capacity or like those big corporates, like those big corporations, those big companies. And how did those places decide who got those jobs? They looked at the people who had the best grades in university. So my parents grew up in a time where education was, even if it wasn't necessarily your only option, it was your best option. It was your best option at having a stable life, a peaceful life, one where you could support yourself and support your family. So that's the reason why they've always cared about education, but they were also aware of how education is treated in China. And sometimes
Is it different?
it's really quite different. I would say it's even cutthroat. In China. Because when my parents were in high school and in university, they would say the teachers, every time after a test, they would put test scores like up on the board with everyone's names next to them. So you know exactly who got
They
what
would
score.
expose everyone.
Yeah, they know everybody got which grade, or this person did really well or this person did really bad.
Especially the low grades.
Especially the low grades, right. So it was this sort of environment where kids are pressured, not just by their families, but by their peers and by their teachers to excel academically. Like kids in China, if you know some of the things that they do through school, like just in their regular studies, it's pretty brutal. Like they're always tired. They don't really have much time for anything else. If they're not in school, they're at like a tutor after school or something like that.
Piano
right?
lessons.
Yeah, piano lessons. It's a lot. And
It's a lot of pressure.
a lot of pressure. Sometimes like the parents will compete with other parents and say like, oh, my kid got this A+ in that class. What did your kid get? Right.
Wow.
It's pretty cutthroat. And so I use that word not as exaggeration. It's actually pretty, it can be pretty harmful, I'd say, even to a kid.
Especially if you're a kid.
Right. Yeah. And like their self-esteem, their passion and their just emotional well-being. My parents went through that sort of thing, and they realized that they didn't want me going through that again.
Experience.
So they didn't want me to have that same experience. They wanted me to have options. They wanted me to have more say myself in the things that I did when I became an adult. So they made the conscious decision to pick up everything they had, basically leave their lives behind to try and start a new one. So we went to California first. We went to the United States first. So the intention was actually to be there. The intention was actually to stay in America. At the time.
How old were you? Like, you were born in China then?
Yes. I was a year and a half old when we left.
Year and a half, okay.
And when we went to California. So the intention was to always actually stay there. But things happen and certain plans didn't work out, and we ended up having the ability to come to Canada through as immigrants. So my parents, when I was about 6, like close to 6, we moved from California to Vancouver, and we've been here ever since.
Richmond, BC.
All over the Lower Mainland. We lived in Burnaby for a number of years. My parents bought their first house in Surrey. But we spent a lot of time in Richmond, and we had a lot of
live in Richmond.
We had a lot of family friends who lived in Richmond and still live in Richmond. So I consider myself more of a Richmond guy. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about this a couple of minutes before, because when I had Marie Huey on the show, she said that Richmond was quite a melting pot and much more multicultural.
Yeah.
What about you? How was your experience growing up in Richmond?
Growing up in Richmond, and doing so more a little bit later, I would say it was really cool. Honestly, like I agree. It was very diverse, very multicultural. It was really a melting pot. Like I had friends from all over, like every little corner of the world. There was some representation in Richmond, in my classes at least. And it kind of opens your eyes to how big the world really is. But when you're 9, 10, or 11, you don't really know how to process any of those things, right? But it was kids together, at lunchtime, and you see like the world reflected around you. You see people with, like Filipino adobo, or like lemongrass chicken from Vietnam, different foods from parts of Africa and parts of the Middle East. Like it's really fascinating.
Yeah. And did you hang out with other kids that speak Mandarin to you when you were living in Richmond?
Well, when my family lived in Richmond the first time around, because we moved around so much, at the time, Mandarin speakers were actually still more of a minority, because the history of Chinese in BC started more with Cantonese than it did with Mandarin. Like it's only within the last decade, I would say, that Mandarin has become more present and more represented. I didn't really grow up around anybody who spoke Mandarin, and like you suddenly like jump started my brain, and I immediately started thinking back to every single kid that I knew when I was going to elementary school in Richmond. I'm like, how many of them actually spoke Mandarin? Oh man, none of them. Like I had a lot of Filipino friends. There were a lot of Indian friends, but nobody who spoke.
And the
Mandarin.
other Chinese kids, they would speak Cantonese.
Yeah, the other Chinese kids that I was friends with were Cantonese speakers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that a problem, or you didn't care about it? Okay, because I still got my parents. I can learn and practice with them.
I still have my parents. I was speaking Mandarin with them, and when you're on the schoolyard, you're speaking English anyway.
So it wasn't an issue.
No, definitely not.
Back to your first job. So Fairchild was actually a training program.
Yeah.
What was your official, formal, first job?
I consider it my show at the UBC campus radio station. So CITR 101.9 FM, all the love to that
Always
station.
In your heart.
That was my start. And if I did not do that, I probably would not have the job I have right now. So I have a lot to thank CITR for, and not just for the opportunity to do my own show, but I consider that my real start in the industry.
And that was a bilingual radio program, right? I mean, were you able to speak some Mandarin there, or?
I was able to, but more to kind of explain the context of certain lyrics or certain songs that we played on the radio. And it was but it was not a show that I presented in Mandarin. I presented it in English.
Mainly in English.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So from the moment you became a newsroom intern to your current role at CBC. Can you kind of walk us through your career story at CBC?
Yeah, so my first internship with CBC, like the first time I had set foot in some sort of more official capacity, was actually when I was interning for CBC News Network in Toronto. So that is like the one of the national programs, and CBC's headquarters are in Toronto. And that was the first time that I had ever seen any sort of media organization on that kind of scale. You know, producers and writers and technical supervisors and camera operators and directors and execs and reporters and hosts and anchors. Like everyone had a role. Like everyone was like a part of the machine. Like everyone knew where they went. Everyone understood the job at hand. And it was kind of like this collaborative experience to put on like this ongoing news coverage throughout the entire day about some of the biggest stories that happen in the world. It was really eye-opening, really fascinating. And that was, you know, really cool for a kid who's like, you know, 23, 24, being in a being in a newsroom like that, of that scale. So it was really interesting for that. And like from there, that was my first internship. That was actually still in the middle of my second year of broadcast school. I was still going to BCIT at the time. And when I had finished the classes for BCIT, I interned again for CBC, but this time locally in Vancouver. So I got really lucky. I was selected as an intern to help with that year's provincial election coverage. That was about 2017, May 2017, April to May 2017, when John Horgan was elected Premier of BC. I was an intern who was helping to put that coverage together under, you know, a really great senior producer named Joan Marshall, who was one of the first people who told me, Steve's got a future in this industry. Like you were going to do some great things here. So like keep at it. And I think you absolutely should like stay here and work and continue your journey in the newsroom. So that was the second experience which got me through the door. And from that point until about September 2018, I was working for CBC. I started off in television as like a television associate producer, so writing and editing. And then I moved into radio, where I became an associate producer for current affairs for the afternoon show, for the morning show. And like that's kind of like what I'm still doing now, actually.
What's the main difference between hopefully it's not a stupid question, between radio and TV working? What's the main difference?
So not a stupid question at all. There are a whole lot of similarities in terms of like the writing style and in terms of the way that you put the programming together with the same sort of news sense and the same sort of journalism sense that you take to either of these things. But some of the production is different, right? When you're doing TV, you're definitely focusing more on visuals because you have to give people something to look at, right? You have to have something to show people. But radio is very different. Radio, I would say, is more intimate, actually. I would say it's a whole lot more accessible because, especially when you do something like current affairs at CBC, what is it really? It's just a conversation.
But you've said that now you got cameras, even if you're doing radio, right? So
yeah, radio isn't just radio anymore. TV isn't just TV anymore. Welcome to 2025. So yeah, we do have cameras in our broadcasting in our studio now, in Studio 10 at CBC. So it's like these pod cameras that are fixed to like a pole, and they just hang down from the ceiling, and they're about like, I would say like maybe that big, just like size of like a big grapefruit or something.
Okay.
And it focuses on the host. It focuses on me. There's one for our guests when they come into the studio, and we're still radio primary. Like ultimately the goal is still to make sure that it's keeping true to the spirit of radio, but with that added element for digital streaming services.
When was your first appearance on television? What do you remember?
Okay, so there's a couple different ways I can answer this question. So if we want to talk about the first time I was on TV, it might have actually been when I was at BCIT still. Because as a student at BCIT in the broadcast journalism program, you are in charge of putting on radio programs, filing radio news reports, and every week or so also putting on something called BCIT Magazine, which is a television news broadcast that comes out of the BCIT journalism program and ends up on Shaw TV. So if we want to go by that, the first time I was on TV at some point in 2016 in like November on a very rainy Vancouver day was the first time I was on TV. But if we want to talk about the first time I was on CBC television, that's actually, I would say maybe a whole lot more recent actually. Yeah. Maybe just within the past 7 or 8 months. Yeah. Like the first time I was on CBC television.
What did you do? Like, do you remember exactly what you were doing, talking about, or?
Yeah, I was filling in for Darius Madavi, our weather person.
Okay.
So
wow.
I was doing the weather. I had this big screen behind me with all of these weather graphics loaded up, and I am delivering the weather forecast.
Is it live or you just record it and then?
Oh, it's always live.
It's always live.
It's always live.
That's scary. Were you nervous or excited? Well, can you describe your feelings back then?
I kind of just defaulted back to radio mode. You know, you know the job, you know what you have to do. You're prepared as best as you can be. You know, your suit is pressed. You've got your television makeup on, so you know you look good. And then at that point, it's just doing the job. Like it's what it boils down to is that it's still a conversation, right? You still have. You still have things to say, and you are informing the public. Like the camera, which for TV are much bigger and much more noticeable than the ones that we have in the radio studio these days. So, absolutely understand for some people like that can be intimidating, but you kind of just have to pretend like it's not there and just do your job.
Just pretend. So in 2022, you wrote an article about the resilience against racism and the number of anti-Asian incidents that happened in Richmond during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever faced or know someone that close to you that has faced any of these kind of incidents?
Yeah. Well, anybody who's spent time here, I would say, has probably faced something along those lines, right? Like even if it's not overt, like it can still be a microaggression. It could just be like a weird look someone gives you, or someone who opens up a conversation by saying, "Hey, do you speak English?" Well, I mean, sure I do, right? But like I've been called slurs. Like I've had those words tossed at me. My family's has had those words tossed at them. Friends of mine have experienced things like that. It's unfortunate that it happens, but the fact kind of remains that it does happen, right? But
do you remember any specific situation that was actually?
I think the clearest one was at one point in school where an argument with another kid ended up in some pretty heated discussions, like arguments, right? I don't remember if it got into like fist fight territory, but words were said, very hurtful words were said. And
you remember that what that other kid said to you, or?
Well, it was the C word.
Oh,
right? It was the C word. And I don't remember much else from that, except I heard that and I was just like, what does that word mean? Right? And it wasn't until much later that I realized that it was a slur. It was something that was meant to insult me.
But you felt something. You didn't know the meaning of it, but you felt something. You started to argue with them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you a young kid or?
I think just towards the end of elementary school.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, surprising too that another kid somehow knows that word. Kid around your own age knows that word and is somehow using it against you.
When you remember that and you writing an article about racism, what's the importance for you to write about that? And you're now being able to, share with so many people, right? Working at CBC. What's the importance for you of, being able to write about these topics?
Yeah. For me, it's more about helping any number of people who read our coverage or listen to the radio, listen to CBC radio or watch CBC television, it's for me to understand them that this is real, right? I think sometimes we get these blinders on, that we think of some of the things that have happened in recent years when it comes to advancing the cause of social change and social justice and equity and diversity and things like that. A lot of people kind of think that, well, it's done. Like we don't, none of these things are an issue anymore. We fixed all of that. But the truth is that we haven't, not fully, right? And for me to help people understand that, especially in 2022, when it was still something of like a pandemic, that is the reality of what a lot of people were facing. That is the reality of a lot of people, even in Richmond, a place which is so diverse, felt like that they were afraid. They were afraid for their safety. They were afraid for the safety of their family, of their friends, because of this global pandemic. So it's to help people understand, like, this still happens. Like, and it's unacceptable that it still does. Like, ultimately what journalism is about, it's about sparking dialogue. It's about creating conversations around these things and help bringing that necessary context to people to say, why is this happening? Here are the reasons for that, but also why there are so many people who are afraid, who are speaking out, and who want you to know that this is wrong. So it's helping people to have even having those conversations with themselves or with their families, or doesn't matter, but to spark that dialogue and to help people understand that this is reality. This is the stuff that people, our neighbors, go through. And yeah, it's ultimately to help people understand, to get insights into these things that they otherwise might not have known very much about.
Having other talented, Asians in broadcasting, paving the way, that probably makes the whole difference. Who do you look up to, and why?
Ooh, well, there are a whole lot of people on that list, and a whole lot of people that I'm grateful for through my career and through the things that that people have helped me with, people who have helped me grow as a journalist and as a broadcaster. Right off the bat, I can think of immediately Joan Marshall, who I'm going to shout out once more, the senior producer who I interned with during the 2017 provincial elections. She was the one who really helped me get my foot in the door. She was the one who helped me kind of, have faith in myself that I could do this. And then after Joan Marshall, another great mentor of mine is CBC host Michelle Elliott. Like, she was the one who kind of encouraged me to have more confidence in my voice and my perspective, and also even my own interests, and how all of these things can still serve to make me a better journalist and make me a better broadcaster, to help me find like those interesting stories along the way. And I'm just so grateful to her as well. And I will also mention one other person who, I've met a couple times, just kind of like very briefly and in passing, through like journalism school and also my time at CBC, Andrew Zhang, because he used to work in Vancouver, actually. Like he used to be the anchor of the 6 o'clock program at Vancouver until he took the big job for the National, and he relocated and he relocated for that job. And then after he moved off of the National, he's now doing like a special news program where he like sits down, he explains like the big news stories. Great program, by the way. But he was a person who, when I asked him questions as a student about like how I can kind of like make my mark in this industry, he was so kind when he was doing that. But also, like, the first time I saw him on TV, it was like that representation thing again, right? Like, he was the one who made me feel like I could have a place in this industry. Like, he started hosting at CBC Vancouver when I just started getting started in radio. So he was having him around, I think it gave not just me, but a whole ton of other Asian journalists like the confidence,
Like, I also can do that.
Yeah,
right?
Hope and faith and the belief that they could have a space in this industry too.
Yeah, I watch everything he does. Really like him.
He's great.
Yeah,
he's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, if you have to pick one special moment in your career so far,
Mm-hmm.
what would it be? Hey, if you're enjoying this episode, please consider subscribing. It helps this channel grow and get recommended to more people. Thank you so much. Back to the episode.
Wow. One special thing. You're gonna have to let me think about this for a little bit because like I have been
take your time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just like, I have had the opportunity to do so many interesting stories and meet so many interesting people over the years. Like it's like I interviewed another one of my fellow journalists, Bridget Schulte, for a different story like months ago. But she said something that I thought was really interesting, and she said, "How amazing is it that we get to have a job where all we do is learn about things and then share it with our audience. We share it with our readers and listeners on the radio. Like, how great is it that is what we get to do day in and day out, right?" And I've come into contact with some amazing people, amazing individuals, and amazing groups through the stories and the reporting that I've done. I've done stories on the Steveston Judo Club, which has been there for ages and was, started by Japanese fishermen as a thing for kids in the community to do because there wasn't a whole lot around for the Japanese community at the time, right? I think of the opportunity I had to ask, Manny Jacinto a couple questions when he was in The Acolyte for Star Wars. But one thing that really stands out to me, and I say this not just because this is the story I won my first journalism award for, but I did this story about a gentleman who was an engineer in the Philippines, and when he and his family came here, he worked as a custodian. And shortly before he retired, he reached out to us about something that he was doing that he was really proud of. So he had these inventions. He had like these gadgets and tools that he made himself that he used in his work as a custodian. So he took like these old hockey sticks and like this weird sort of little rig, and he used it to make a lunch table lifter. Yeah, so it's like he would put the like the hockey sticks on like I guess like a winch, like a lever, basically. And then he would use that to pull up those big folding tables. Like, at like your kid's school, like the lunch tables, like the big heavy ones, like the really, really big ones. So when you store them, they have to like come up like that, like a triangle. So you have to like fold it inwards on wheels, and then you lock it together, and then you store it away. So he had that lunch table lifter that he used to lift those tables up, and then he would be able to just like come over, use his hands, just like push them together. And then he also made what he called the duster blaster, which was like basically like an old vacuum machine that he would put like the feather duster into and would take the dust out, and then he would keep using it. And then my favorite one is the snow shovel for seniors. He called it the snow shovel for seniors. So he took like a garbage can lid, and then he reshaped it into like the actual shovel itself. And then it has kind of like this lever mechanism, which he pushes it. And then once he gets a good amount of snow, he like lifts it up just by using his hands because it's on wheels and it's on its own little lever. And then he moves it around. And then it's a push mechanism. He pulls like a handle, and then the shovel would just come down like that.
That's
and
why it's for seniors. I
get
it.
And it would just dump the snow like that. All of these things that he made were used. He used repurposed stuff, like stuff that probably would have ended up in a landfill, stuff that probably would have ended up thrown away. And he took these things and he used them. He gave them new purpose. He gave them, and he used it to support his own work. So not only did he say like, this is like the environmentally minded way, like let's not create more waste. Let's rethink these things, use our creativity, and help make our lives not just more interesting, but more fun, and our jobs more joyful. And he was just like this incredibly, passionate gentleman who, was eager to share his story and tell us about, his vision, the importance of creativity in his life, and how him just having the ability to tinker while still remaining environmentally conscious of not creating more waste and taking these old things and giving them new life and using it to support his work, making it more fun in the process. Like, oh man, what a great story.
Who is this guy named?
Paul Rebucal.
Okay.
Paul Rebucal, yeah. It's funny you mentioned that too, because when we did that story, the story became so big. We had like these, like, I want to say like auto parts manufacturers and like hardware stores reaching out to me and my colleagues saying like, we want to get in touch with Paul because we want to give him some materials. And it was really interesting, but yeah, like that's still one of my proudest moments. And not just because I got an award out of that, but because it demonstrates the power of journalism. And what is journalism ultimately about? It's about the people. It's about our communities.
Yeah.
It's about people who have stories to share.
Sure.
And that to me, like, no disrespect to Manny Jacinto, but like, like that's like that story, like sometimes the best stories come out when it's just,
I don't think it's the same thing, but I truly feel that what I'm doing with this podcast, it's kind of sort of a similar, like helping Asian people to put their story out there.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, when you're saying that, I kind of remember all of my previous interviews, right? I mean, I feel like I'm doing kind of similar thing. It's really special. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I've always maintained the belief that every person has a story to tell. Every person has experiences, has joy, and has passions that are worth sharing. And a big part of my job is to help share those stories. And it's a big part of what we at the CBC are really passionate about. So, you and I are on the same wavelength when it comes to that.
I think so.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it seems you're always having fun when you're working, right? Why do you love broadcasting? I think you already answered that, but can you comment on that? Because you're always having fun. It's real.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to have fun. Like, you always got to have ways to have fun. And I think, when you say like, why do I love this? And it's not just because it's something that feels right. For me, like I came from like an academic background, right? Then like I went to university, I did my degree in something that, even though I really enjoyed what my major was, I realized at some point along the line that like I didn't want to make that my life, right? But I had broadcasting. I had something that made me feel like I had a voice. I had something that made me feel like I could tell these stories, that I could share interests with people and interesting things and sometimes even strange and funny things, but also cool things with other people. And I first did that through the show that I hosted at CITR. But what it boils down to is that like I've always loved story. And it goes back to what I was just saying, right? Like I truly do believe that every person has a story worth telling. And to be able to do that, to be able to learn about people's stories and to be able to learn about their joys and their passions and sometimes their pain and their sorrows, but being able to be able to learn that and to be able to platform that and to be able to give opportunities for real people to talk about the realities of their life. It's so rewarding.
Yeah, it is.
Like I don't know if there's another way that I can describe it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a feeling that it's a feeling of connectivity, right? You feel like you can identify with this person, you can empathize and sympathize with this person, but also feeling like that you have an opportunity to give them a moment to share those things that they otherwise might have been denied.
Can you give a bit of advice to someone that has just started or would like to follow the same career path as yours?
Oh, okay. Well, the first thing I would say for sure is be ready to work hard. Journalism is a fast-paced industry. It's a fast-paced workflow. Sometimes you do feel like you're flying by the seat of your pants, right? It can feel anxious and it can feel stressful. But that doesn't make anything that we do less worth it. Be prepared to work hard. Be prepared to come in with ideas. And the follow-up to that, I would say, is be you. Never, ever be afraid to be you. Because one of the amazing things about journalism, about media, about broadcasting, about these stories that we keep talking about, is it's representative of who we are in Canada. It represents the sort of mosaic that we have built in this country of so many people's histories, individual histories and shared histories, and a million different experiences. But the only way that you can help people understand the beauty and the complexity of what we have is by bringing your own touch to it. If you are in any newsroom, if you're in any media organization, you are there because they saw something in you.
Because it's you.
Yeah. So never, ever be afraid to share your own perspectives. Make your thoughts known, but always be true to yourself. Because it's all of those, because it's your perspective, your experiences, and who you are that will make your work that much better.
Thanks for sharing this. We talked about it, and I already said that I've never seen that such a large number of Asian talent in the broadcasting industry, right? As we have in Canada, especially in Vancouver. And it's a wonderful surprise to me to this day. Having you as a guest today makes this podcast even more special. And I'm really proud of that. What makes you proud to be Asian?
What makes me proud to be Asian? Man. Well, the culture that we share, the richness of that history, the things that people write textbooks about, right? That's one thing. But it's the love that we have for each other, right? It's the love that we have for our families, for for loved ones, but also for friends. The idea of welcoming each other, welcoming people who are outside of that culture to come into your space and to partake and learn and understand. That's what makes me proud. That shared experience more than anything.
Thanks for being on the show. That was an incredible conversation. Thanks for coming today.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you.